1, 2, 3, swing it.
Do you have an old sound tape or your favourite cassette tape that you want converted to CD or MP3 format? Do you need a demo CD, radio ad, a DJ or even a sound system for your wedding, birthday or special occasion? Then why not get in contact with KTR Records on 07931 152 448 or check out our website on www.ktrrecords.com. We have been in business since 2004 and also undertake community projects. So for your remixes, duplets and all your sound editing needs, why not contact KTR Records, official sponsor of World Jam Global Radio. KTR Records, coming your way.
I was terrified about sharing the vulnerabilities of people with difficulties reading and spelling words. However, I could see the value in sharing, and I have taken the time to make some notes about this in my book, Dyslexic: The Silent Difference. You can get your copy now at www.a1tribe.com or amazon.com or amazon.co.uk. Thank you again, everyone, for your support.
Red Promotions and Highly Blessed Promotions give you Tobago 2020. Tobago 2020, the ultimate carnival experience. Landing on Sunday, 23rd of February 2020. The all-inclusive holiday of a lifetime at an unbeatable price, starting from £1,349 for 7 nights, all-inclusive, with 10 nights optional. There will be fun-filled day and night events like the popular all-white party, pool party, barbecue boat ride, plus the carnival experience and much more. Music by some of London's finest, Courtney Melody, Commander B, D-Mac, TC Fords, DJ Matt and Euro Millions and more. So join us and let's live our best lives. For general inquiries, call 07729 190 026. For booking and more info, call SN Travel on 0207 254 0136. Quoting Tobago 2020. Sponsored by VibesFM.net, MrMighty.co.uk, SN Travel and
World Jam Global.
Do you like music like this?
Great music all the time.
Or like this?
The music you love.
Maybe this.
Great music that makes you want to turn up the volume loud.
Or life track like this.
Especially where human life is concerned. Surely, sooner or later, people will realise that lives actually matter.
Then you're in the right place. Keep it locked to World Jam Global, where music is harmony.
Music 24 hours a day, 365 days a year.
Yeah, you're a World Jam. Hotter than them.
See live schedule.
Already did my time. I paid for my crime.
Saturday night.
Already did my time. I paid for my crime.
It's 6 o'clock.
Already did my time. I paid for my crime.
Time for another edition of Issues Today, live on World Jam Global Radio. Give me time as I send this stream live across the world.
I paid for my crime. Back in the day, I didn't really care about the system. It was all about survival. It was do or die. I had too many rivals. I was too young and foolish to stay in school. I learned my lessons in the streets. There was not a man I couldn't beat. I was good with my hands and very quick on my feet. I was swimming in women. I had girls all over the street. I was getting money. Life was so sweet. Now things have changed. The whole game has been rearranged. I'm a changed man. Don't need no gun.
I'll give you a rundown of exactly what's going on the show today, who we've got on, what we're going to be talking about, who our guest speakers are, who our even secret speakers are.
I paid for my crime. Already getting my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime.
Won't be much longer, guys.
I was a drug dealer, sold more drugs than Superfly, but I never got high on my own supply. I'm not proud of what I had to do. That's why I'm telling my story to you and you. I had to repent, I must admit. I was doing all kind of stupid shit. Now sit back and think it over since I've gotten older. The life I used to live, I wouldn't do it again. I was young and dumb, my brain was so numb. I was a real Forrest Gump, but I was nobody's chump. Me and Billy the Kid had a lot in common. I was the real Terminator, much meaner than Arnold Schwarzenegger. I'd chew you up and spit you out like a real alligator, especially all you haters.
The opening statements are going on right now. He could be facing life in prison. Prison.
Already did my time, paid for my crime. Already did my time. Already did my time, paid for my crime. Already did my time. Pay for my crime, pay for my crime, pay for my crime, pay for my crime. Already did my time, I paid for my crime. Already did my time, I paid for my crime. I'm trying to get this felony off my back so I can get my life on track.
Big shout outs to Anne-Marie Grant, Margot Cifuentes.
Again, this is my message to all of my friends in the pen, statewide, worldwide. There was not a man I couldn't beat. I was good with my hands and very quick on my feet. I was swimming in women. I had girls all over the street. I was getting money. Life was so sweet. Now things have changed. The whole
now, ladies and gentlemen, I just want to welcome you to Issues Today on World Jam Global Radio, where my special guest speaker is Tonja Brown, and we are doing part 3 of the Nolan Klein story, To Prove His Innocence. We have as our guest speaker today Tonja Brown. We should have had Treva Hearne, who is the author of the book To Prove His Innocence, and she was also Nolan's attorney for some time. Unfortunately, we've not been able to get her online for various A, technical reasons, and B, because she's really caught up trying to get something done somewhere else, which is as important as what we're doing here today, if not more important. But she's been trying desperately hard to get on the show today, but we've not been able to get her on. So Anne-Marie Grant is also going to be supporting Tonja Brown and standing by in the background.
Think it over since I've gotten older. The life
and if you are listening, please do remember you will not be able to partake in the Skype call,
but I was
and listen to the show at the same time, as it will feedback. We'll get some echo and nobody will be able to hear you. So once you do come onto the Skype, you're going to have to come off the call. Oh, sorry, you're going to have to come off the stream, which is going wherever you're watching it from. So on our behalf, we also have my assistant producer TJ. We also have one of our fellow roundtable members, Stephanie Babb.
Facing life in prison.
And we are just going to be rounding up in just a very short time. But this week you are joining us for the final part of the Nolan Klein story, To Prove His Innocence. We've told how Nolan got mixed up in this investigation. We've told how corrupt and misinformed the whole investigation was. We've uncovered the truth behind his alibi. We've proved evidence was withheld. We've proved that Nolan Klein died in prison for a crime he did not commit. Now, today, we are going to tell you how we uncovered the truth and what the justice system failed to do. This is one that you can't afford to miss. Joining us today is Tonja Brown, sister of Nolan Klein, alongside Stephanie Babb, our member of the roundtable, TJ, Therese Gallagher, my right hand. Couldn't do anything without her. My assistant producer,
against us.
Therese,
but deliver us from evil.
And also supporting Tonja, we've got Anne-Marie Grant. So stand by, we'll be with you in just a few moments.
Pay for my crime, pay for my crime, pay for my crime, pay for my crime, pay for my crime. All those drive-by killings, stop them. It ain't about nothing. He who was out sin, let him cast the first stone.
Shouts out to Kenneth Page in Leicestershire. That's just up the road from me, Anne-Marie. Hey, how we doing, Vanessa?
Citizen again.
Hello, Margot.
To all of my friends in the pen, statewide, worldwide, and put down those knives. Stop stabbing each other. Yeah.
Vanessa says she's working but listening. God bless you. We're going to be with you in just a few seconds. Now, as I said, you are joining us this week for the final part of the Nolan Klein story to prove his innocence. We have told how Nolan got mixed up in this investigation. We've told how corrupt and misinformed the whole investigation was. We've uncovered the truth behind his alibi. We've proved evidence was withheld. And we've proved that Nolan Klein died in prison for a crime he did not commit. Today, we will tell you how we uncovered the truth and what the justice system failed to do. Joining us today will be his sister, Tonja Brown, who was with us for the first 2 shows. This is part 3 and the final part of the Nolan Klein story. And supporting Tonja will be Anne-Marie Grant, a dear friend of ours, who we've also had on this show before now. And supporting us here will be one of our team members from the round table, Stephanie Babb. And always, as always, is assistant producer TJ Therese Gallagher. And first and foremost, let me just bring in TJ just to round up on where we are, what we're doing, and what we've done. Hi, TJ. Hi, TJ. You're gonna have to unmute your mic. Oh, TJ. Hi, TJ. Hi, TJ. Stephanie, do you want to come in for a minute? Let me just knock TJ out and I'll bring her back in again. TJ, are you there? Okay. We've lost TJ. I'm going to try and bring her back in now. Bear with me. Let's see what happens here. Either it works or it doesn't work. Always these technical difficulties. TJ. Hi, TJ. Right, Stephanie, do you want to come in? We can't have silence on the radio. Do you want to come in, Steph? Can anybody hear me? Hello,
okay,
can
that's
anybody?
Weird.
Can anybody hear me?
Yeah.
He might have hit his mic button for us, though.
Hey, can anybody hear me?
Okay. Is he still talking? I mean,
I can't hear anything.
Can anybody hear me?
Okay. Here we go.
Yeah,
boss.
Can everybody hear me? Are we there?
Yes.
Okay, let's go. TJ, the introduction is yours. My fault. I made a mistake. Woo woo.
Hi.
Hi, I had the microphone turned down. I hadn't turned it back up since so God knows what was going on because, yeah, it was me. I had you all down.
That's okay, boss.
That's
How you
right.
doing?
I'm good. So how are we all
Good.
doing? How's everybody doing on the show?
Great, thank you.
Okay, so
Good.
TJ, let's have a brush up. Thank you very much. We've got Tonja Brown on the show. We've got Stephanie Babb on the show. We'll have Anne-Marie Grant on the show. But let's have a round up from our dearest producer, TJ. Come on, let's go, TJ.
Hey. So I wanted to go back and talk about Botham Jean's killing.
Yeah, so,
and what's transpired. Yeah, right? I mean, it's horrible. His neighbor was shot, murdered, executed intentionally. I mean, this is just like mind-blowing.
Yeah, I mean, and that was just within hours after us doing the show.
Right.
With, where Amber Geiger was sentenced to 10 years, ridiculously so, most of us thought.
Right.
But Steph, let's just bring in Stephanie very quickly. Stephanie, do you have any thoughts on this issue?
Oh, yeah, I do. From my understanding, they've already found the quote-unquote 3 drug dealers that apparently assassinated him. Kind of interesting thing is how he was a primary witness. It just shows you the level of corruption that they're willing to go to keep things all wrapped up.
But here's the thought for me, right? Where would that leave the family of Botham Jean because I'm under the understanding that Amber Geiger started her appeal long before the trial. So the appeal process is already happening. So if she was to be granted an appeal, bearing in mind that he was the chief prosecution witness, where will that leave the prosecution case against her then?
Dead in the water.
Yeah.
Right?
I would think so.
That would be the purpose.
That's my thoughts. And
Right.
even if it was 3 drug dealers that took him out, I would have imagined that the 3 drug dealers were put up to it by somebody, who would have something to gain
Absolutely.
by him being taken out of the picture.
Yep.
And 3 drug dealers. I mean, they just pigeonholed this so bad. Oh, talk about stereotypical things, and then taking them out. Taking the witness out
Here's
like
the
that.
thing: if Botham Jean, right, was a church-going, entrepreneur kind of guy who really a worship leader as well as he was a real man of God. As I know him to be, and let me just say this, because sometimes me and TJ has had this conversation about, convenient Christianity, etc. When you've got, we're not talking about people who pretend to be Christians or people who would like to be Christians or people think it's a cool thing to be Christian. We're talking a guy who was a worship leader. He stood at the front of the church and led worship, sang, gospel. This is a guy that was committed to the church and the ministries of the church, right? So
He walked his talk.
So why would he have drug dealers on his case or even around his fraternity? It just doesn't
Right?
make
That's
sense.
right.
That would not be his social
Exactly.
group, right? We're not talking about an ex-gangbanger turned good. We're not talking about a guy who's just found his way in faith, who's turned away from, we can talk about gang members who've come out of gangs after finding faith, or drug dealers or criminals who have come to faith, after a lifetime of living a life of crime. But this is not what we're talking about here. We're talking about a guy who's lived for the church all his life, who's got no history, is not on a police radar, has got no issues regarding drugs, crime, or that sort of stuff. Why would he have people like that either after him, around him, or in his fraternity? It just does not make sense. But here we are.
No, it doesn't, but it is convenient.
Yeah.
It's very convenient. And how quickly it happened. They already had the appeal set up, and then, boom, the witness is gone.
And that's what we're talking about. We're talking about the day after she was sentenced.
Insane.
I suppose...
Okay, so the whole time, let me interject here. The whole time that this is happening, at the same time on the news, they were reporting a woman had a video of the entire thing, and she was saying how she was interrogated and told to back off and gagged. And so, does anyone hear about her yet? Not yet.
Oh, that's the gag, though. You're not supposed to know about the truth. They're going to go to any length in which to shut it up. Obviously, apparently, to the point of assassinating. But that's what this is all about, isn't it?
Well,
getting rid of people.
Yeah. I think we really did that show justice last week. And it was just a real crying shame that literally within hours it was only a couple of hours after we'd finished doing the show, that the news broke out that Botham Jean's neighbour had been shot dead, assassinated, executed. And I think that's a real sad story, and I suppose more will come out of that as time goes by. But as
more cover up.
Yeah, I think for the families that are involved in all of this, affected and impacted by all of this, our hearts, our thoughts, and our prayers go out to all of them.
I think the whole country's affected, don't you?
Well, you imagine that.
I'm affected.
I mean, okay, 10
you're
hold on a second.
affected
10
and you're in
yeah.
another
So
country.
10 years was a light sentence, and people was disgusted with the sentence. But it was a glimmer of hope that at least somebody had been convicted, and the hope was that maybe
Right.
But now, everybody's going to be looking over their shoulders, wondering when will this appeal come, and how quickly will they push it through now that they've got no prosecution evidence to push against her again.
And who's next?
Yeah.
And not to mention the 3 men that are now in the whole process of this, who just killed the witness.
They'll just be done for murder, and there'll be no conspiracy attached to it. That's the real unfortunate truth.
Right.
Right. So yeah. So there we go again. We're in it.
It's quite preposterous, actually.
Absolutely.
It's disheartening. It's disheartening. It's scary, very scary. But you know, when we're talking about the government, they do what they want.
Yeah.
They do what they want here.
Very true.
And, you know, it goes all the way back to us talking about qualified immunity and, you know, and the Brady violations. And, you know, it's really a sad, sad world, isn't it?
It is. And, you know, for me, I just want to... I'm not sure who's trying to call me in again. It's probably Treva. Can somebody tell her to stop trying to call me in because I'm on this call and she's trying to break into the call that we're on. She needs to get on Skype if she wants to speak. I just can't keep doing this. Sorry, guys, this is going to get frustrating. So somebody please message Treva and ask her not to do it because it's coming through on this call. Right. So let's get back to today's show, shall we? Today we're looking at the Nolan Klein Part 3 story. And we have with us Tonja Brown and Anne-Marie Grant. So let's, without no further ado, let us introduce Tonja Brown so we can start getting on to this story. Before we do so, I just want to say a big shout out to a very dear friend of mine, Elaine Hemi, who's out near Southampton. And she says that she's listening to the debate. And then an even bigger shout to Maria Tolley, who's out in South Wales, Cardiff. And Natasha Keys, who's up there I think she's up there by Manchester somewhere. She's just setting off for work now. But these are all people here in the UK that are all interested in what we're doing as far as Issues Today is concerned. So we just want to give them a big shout out. Okay. So, Tonja, are you there? Tonja Brown, you're going to have to unmute your mic.
Yeah. Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, now I can. So,
okay, great.
Tonja, if you just want to introduce yourself, please. Tell people who you are, what you do, and what you're about.
Hi, I'm Tonja Brown. I live in Carson City, Nevada. Over the years, I've become an advocate for the inmates and for the innocent. My brother, Nolan Klein, was wrongfully convicted in January of 1989 of an armed robbery sexual assault. And over the years, I've been trying to and have been proving his innocence and trying to get the courts and law enforcement agencies to see the truth for what it really is, that the prosecuting attorney had withheld the evidence that would have exonerated Nolan Klein. His public defender was so concerned about protecting her career and not being found ineffective that she would go on to commit perjury. And as a result of that perjury, Miss Nolan would remain in prison for over 21 years until his death.
That's, you know, when you imagine being convicted of a crime that you did not commit, and maybe spending a number of years, if not most of your years, incarcerated in prison, that's kind of bad enough. But when you talk about somebody actually, and again, we'll probably get back to that later on, the negligence that was involved in him losing his life while he was incarcerated, being denied medical assistance, etc. That's just a whole nother story where you actually, you know, that's worse than a death sentence because he wasn't sentenced to die, but yet he died in prison, never getting an opportunity to see himself set free or even have an opportunity to fight for his freedom as such. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
And so you've spent all of these years fighting for his freedom. And just try and give us a quick roundup of what we managed to do over the first two shows that we did revolved around. So first, take us through in about 10 minutes. Take us through the initial investigation, how that started. Take us through the arrest, and then the trial and conviction, and then we're going to bring it right up to date.
Okay. The first investigation began when Nolan had been picked up for questioning back in May of 1988. Our mother and I, and we all knew, there were other defense witnesses who knew the truth, that he was in Jack's bar in Carson City during the time the crime was being committed. Nolan had been picked up for questioning. He had not been arrested, but was picked up for questioning. And so without any Miranda warning, they obtained information from him that was used against him at trial. And some of this would include a photo lineup of him that was placed in a photo lineup array. What people didn't realize back then, but do now, is that that was a very suggestive photo lineup, and that it was made for anyone, and the victim and anyone looking at it, to go right to his picture because it was so suggestive. And so there was also a newspaper clipping of the suspect, which did not resemble Nolan at all. And that's where we began our investigation. Nolan had left Reno to move up to Washington, and while he was up there, our mother was trying to clear his name at that time. She went around, she obtained statements from witnesses who were present with him at the time of the crime was being committed. She provided them to Sparks Detective Sherman Box, and along with the DA's office. They had received all of this information, so then now they had information that Nolan had basically an airtight alibi. Nolan comes back for his son's birthday. He gets arrested. During this time, Detective Sherman Box, he arrests Nolan, and while he's there, he actually steals a power of attorney, which relinquished or was given permission to Nolan's girlfriend, Renee, to get his Harley Davidson out. And we needed that because we had, my mother had hired a private attorney at the time, but he needed $5,000 because he was going to get the case thrown out because, again, there was evidence that was obtained without ever Miranda. So without the evidence, there would have been no trial. Okay? And so the detective found, when he arrested Nolan, he found a newspaper article in Nolan's vehicle when they found his vehicle. And it was seized for evidence, but it was never used at trial. And the reason it wasn't used at trial was because they believed that vehicle was tied to another crime, an April 21st crime that they suspected Nolan had committed, or rather another person, which was Zarsky, who was the prime suspect as well. But that victim had cleared Nolan and his car, and that was who was hidden from the defense. And Shelley O'Neill was given a newspaper article that my mother discovered, which it did talk about another crime, and the detective believed they were committed by the same person, which she never looked into. And so while Nolan was arrested, Detective Box came in, and he mentioned that he had found that newspaper clipping where it showed a bank robbery up in Salem Creek, Washington. And it had the video surveillance camera from the bank of the suspect. Well, people believed it was Nolan, and even his own friends, and Nolan really wanted this evidence to give to his attorney, which I was to get from Detective Box. When I spoke to Detective Box, he said that he was going to use that and give it to the district attorney for evidence against Nolan, and I said that was great. Nolan tells Shelley O'Neill, that was his public defender, about this. So when Shelley goes to talk to Detective Box about it, Detective Box told her that he never believed no such thing. Okay? So in 91, when we do have the post-conviction hearing, I'm just going to briefly get to it, it did reveal that Detective Box absolutely believed Nolan was this bank robber. And he put it in where in a statement that the district attorney office had as well, but never turned over. So had Shelley done her job, it would have been able to show that this detective was mistaken too. So if this season's detective was mistaken, why couldn't the victims have been mistaken as well? You know, on mistaken identity. So Nolan gets arrested. At the time, there was, the state had a witness by the name of Luann Gritter. Shelley was correct. She was a scorned woman. It goes to, and then, so since Luann Gritter was a friend of Nolan's, Shelley asked Luann Gritter to call Luann Gritter to see what she was going to testify to. Well, here's where the problem lies. Shelley should have done it herself, because at trial, it was turned against him as though Nolan was trying to get Luann to change her testimony. That wasn't the case here. So then Shelley had made some promises on things that she was going to do for him. She wasn't following through. In fact, sometimes she didn't even show up for the hearings and left Nolan hanging there. And then it was canceled and have to be brought in and rescheduled. So eventually, and I believe October of 1988, Nolan filed a motion to have her dismissed as counsel. At the time, she was pregnant, and her excuse was she was tired, she wasn't feeling well, but she would get to it soon. She was supposed to file for a bail reduction. She never did. She was going to file to have the evidence suppressed, which she never did. So then it moves on to the other situation that comes up just before the trial. I had a conversation with Shelley. She started to do some things. She had made some promises to Nolan and I that she was working on his case and that these are the things she was going to do. She had contacted a voice forensic expert out of California. His name was Fosik Posa. Nolan wanted to have a polygraph examination set up. And Nolan requested that he had heard of DNA, and he requested that the DNA evidence to be tested against him that would clear his name. All of this was to be done. None of it, the DNA testing did not get done. She was going to leave it up to the state to do it, and it didn't get done. She did the testing for the voice of forensic expert. That was all set up. So Nolan was there, and again, Shelley had promised to be there. She never showed, and Nolan was upset because she wasn't there, and she had promised she would be there. He went through with that, and that was completed. And then came time for a polygraph examination. And when Nolan, when the polygraph examiner showed up to give Nolan the polygraph examination, he asked for his attorney again because she had promised me and she had promised Nolan she would be there. She never showed, and Nolan was very angry over this. And because of that, he refused to take it. He then asked me to call Shelley O'Neill to have her reschedule that polygraph examination for when she was going to be there. I called several times every day for nearly 2 weeks. And after 2 weeks, Nolan told me to tell it, forget it. I'm done with her. So anyway, so then it goes into getting into the trial. Now we get to the trial, and the day of the week before the trial, the Thursday before the trial began, I think it was the 17th of January. Anyways, Shelley brings Nolan in for a change of plea. Nolan wasn't changing his plea, and actually it pissed off the judge, and Shelley was angry about it. And so she told him to get his witness list together. She will be down at the jail to see him, to pick up his witness list. When that time came, that evening, she never showed. She did not show up until the day before the trial began to pick up Nolan's witness list. When Nolan left, and then she left. A couple of hours later go by, and the jail guard officer brought Nolan's witness list behind. Shelley had left it behind, and on the day of the trial began, she told Nolan she was refusing to call his witnesses. And Nolan's witnesses included, let's see, it says I'm going to just read it from the book. It says he had prepared the witness list she requested. The list included Kay Miller, Renee's boss, who could testify. He knew that the arrest hours before the police showed that he could have fled, but didn't. Another witness, Steve Shannon, was Nolan's boss from Clark and Sullivan and could testify regarding Nolan's work habits from moving to state. And the third witness was a police officer from Washoe County Jail who could impeach Luann Gritter's credibility because he used to work with her.
So
with Nolan and Miss Gritter.
So just 1 second. So Treva Hearne says he was instructed not to have the polygraph without his attorney. Treva
was not a part of this.
No. She is sending out a message. So she says he was instructed not to have the polygraph without his attorney. He was proper in refusing. An attorney has to confer with her client prior to any court appearance to change the plea, right?
Yes. She's given you what should have happened.
Right. Okay. Go ahead.
And I'm saying this is what happened, and this she's looking at the legal aspect of what, and that's absolutely correct. Okay. You should not take a polygraph without your attorney present. Okay. Okay, good. I'm glad that she's coming in this way. Okay, so then we get to the trial. Nolan learns that no DNA testing was conducted, that our expert witness, who was going to be Maria Fawcett, was not going, learned that she didn't test anything. But they were going to have a state that Dave Atkinson, who was going to testify to that, but he did not exactly testify to that. It goes through the trial, and there were things that Shelley didn't do and should have. For example, as I stated in the previous shows, the suspect had called the 911 operator and told him that he had robbed the Payless shoe store and he had locked the girls in the bathroom, and if you want to go over and let them out. He never mentioned anything about sexually assaulting anyone. And so when the tape was played, or actually when the state had called in, the prosecuting attorney called in Luann Gritter, she said that that was Nolan's tape on the tape recording. The interesting thing is that Shelley should have objected to that, and I'm sure Treva's going to type in that as to why that should have never been played. So Luann Gritter said that was Nolan's voice on the tape. However, prior to the trial, Shelley had asked me if I could identify Nolan's voice. I said, yes. Why? And she says, well, she says, that's good. She says, because I've listened to the tape recordings, and I don't believe it sounds like Nolan on that tape recording that was called to the 911 operator, and I'm going to have you listen to the tapes and pick out Nolan's voice. I said, okay, I will do that. So as I'm testifying, I'm nervous because I'm expecting to hear the tape recording. It doesn't get played. There's no mention of it or anything. And then I would hear that from Nolan, that Luann Gritter had testified that that was his voice on the tape, and Shelley didn't object to it. So that should have never, ever happened. And the reason it was Nolan's tape of his voice wasn't brought in because I believe that Sherman Box forgot to bring it in for the jury to hear. So the courts should, if they were going to do it, both tapes should have been heard, so they can judge for themselves. Okay. We go through that. We go through the trial of the defense. 5 witnesses testified. Nolan was in Carson City at the time of the crime.
And just remind us again why we didn't have many witnesses to support Nolan's version of events, because he also had witnesses for his alibi. They were all, but it seems like he didn't have any.
No. Nolan had all the witnesses from Jack's Bar did come in to testify. That was Bill Richards, Barbara Hellman, John Darnell, and our mom, Pinky, and myself, because I actually called the bar. Who Shelley O'Neill did not call in to witnesses was the ones that I just mentioned with Nolan. She had there were witnesses on his witness list she refused to call. Then I particularly gave her the names of 3 other witnesses who could have established that Nolan had a 2 to 3 inch beard the night of the crime. Not only that, weeks before, the day of, and weeks after the crime. Mm-hmm. And the reason she didn't do this, which would be found out during the post-conviction, was because she was looking at the wrong photo. She wasn't looking at the photo lineup. She was looking at the booking picture taken 4 months later. That's why she never brought in any of the beard evidence. Okay? And the interesting thing about that, too, is that I would later learn from one of the jurors that she did not realize that, or the jury did not realize that Nolan had a full beard the night of the crime. But to this day,
let's just go back to why nobody raised that the photographs are wrong. They were looking at why wasn't it actually raised and objected to in the first place? Surely somebody should have picked that out.
Because she didn't do her job. She was lazy. And the whole reasoning why is because she says the reason she didn't bring in the beard, she says, according to the booking picture, Mr. Klein had what appeared to be a 2 to 3 day old stubble. Well, she was correct. But that was taken in September of 1988, not the photo lineup. In fact, when I did a protest with her, I ran that down to her, and her jaw just dropped when she realized that was the it. In fact,
I mean, how would you feel as somebody who you've got their life in your hands. You've got somebody's life in your hands, and you fail so miserably over something so technically simple that you could have trampled all over, and that could have been a home run to the defense.
You see, because I have morals and ethics, and Shelley O'Neill doesn't. It was all about protecting her career. She didn't want to be found ineffective. And to be honest with you, I have my reasons why I think she did what she did. And that was all going back to the polygraph examination, because he didn't take it. She had no way of knowing that all Nolan wanted was to her to reschedule it for when she was going to be there. And I believe that's why she did what she did, because she probably believed he committed the crime because he wouldn't take the polygraph, not knowing is that all he wanted was her to be there. And I think that's what this whole thing is about. So then she would later on...
Potentially so, but there was a lot of other mitigating evidence that would suggest that Nolan couldn't have committed the crime, let alone he wasn't even there. And none of that was followed either.
I know. And this was all raised at a post-conviction. Treva can talk about that since she's typing to you. But yeah, that was also raised in the 1991 post-conviction. And I will tell you, in the post-conviction proceedings, in Nolan's 33 claims, there was several grounds dealing with the jury on what I was told by the jury. And to this day, no court has ever addressed why the jury found Nolan Klein guilty. But they believe Shelley O'Neill's lies.
But one of the things that we discussed, one of the things that we discussed on the last show was some of the things that the jurors misinterpreted that led them to the wrong decision. Go over that for me.
And that was put into a post-conviction proceeding, and to this day has never been addressed, and that was this. According to Ann Langer, who was one of the jurors, she at the time when I contacted her in, I believe it was January of 1990, it was right after Nolan's direct appeal. Ann Langer told me that there were main two reasons that they found Nolan guilty, and one of them was they said that when Nolan had taken Teresa out of the bathroom, because they were in a bathroom, he took him into the storeroom, she was able to get a good look at him before he raped her.
But there was apparently there was no lighting in that area, so she couldn't have been able to get a good look at him at all.
Correct. There were no lights on.
So what was it that the jury believed?
They believed that the lights were on, and that Nolan, she was able to get a good look at Nolan. And the other thing too, which was interesting.
So let me just so 1 second, Tonja. Let me just stop you there. When the jurors asked that question, didn't anybody on Nolan's defense understand the implication of the question that the jurors were asking, so that they can challenge it?
No, because this came after the trial. Right. When I contacted the juror to find out what it was that convicted Nolan.
So this wasn't a question that they had asked while they were
No, there was a question they did ask, and it wasn't really a question, is that they informed the court, the judge, that they were deadlocked. They could not reach a decision until they heard two defense witnesses' testimonies read back. So when I asked Ann Langer what it was that they wanted in the testimonies, particularly Bill Richards' testimony, she said that the jury believed that Nolan was at Jack's bar during the night of the crime. However, they believed that Bill Richards was mistaken as to the time Nolan left the bar. That's why they wanted both testimonies.
And did they give an indication as to what was it that convinced them that Bill was wrong about the time? What was it about Bill's testimony that led them to believe that Bill was wrong about the time?
So this is, again, after trial. You got to understand, the judge refused to give them both testimonies. He gave them Bill Richards. So as they're reading Bill Richards' testimony, they came back within about 15 minutes of a guilty verdict. With a verdict. It took longer to find Shelley. But they did come back, and it wouldn't be until January of 1990 I would learn what it was that they were looking for in the testimonies. And according to Ann Langer, she said that they believed Bill was there, Nolan was there during the night of the crime. However, since Bill had talked about the sun going down, they believed that time of the year the sun would set around 8:30 in the evening, which would give Nolan enough time to drive to Sparks to commit the crime. But because Judge McGee refused to give them Barbara Hillman's testimony, the bartender, okay, they didn't know that she had tested. They couldn't remember what she said, and she said that she was there from the time her shift began at 6 p.m. until after 10 p.m. So it would have shown that Nolan could not have been in two places at one time. To this day, that has never been addressed by what the jury found. The reasons the jury found Nolan guilty.
Here's just one moment, because Treva throws something else into the pot. She says that the jurors are influenced by the judge, and this judge was a horrendous alcoholic. Was there any known truth in this?
Oh, there is. Actually, he got arrested. Now, you have to understand, you don't live in Reno, Nevada, but people in the Reno area know that when you're out after dark on 4th Street, that's when all the hookers come out. Well, Judge McGee got busted for drunk driving, being drunk down on 4th Street. and eventually, yes, he admitted, and he's an alcoholic. And eventually, he retired from the bench that year.
Wow. Here's the thing. So, Elaine Hemi says it sounds horrendous, especially when someone is serving a sentence because of incompetence. But Elaine and all of those that are listening who might not have heard from the beginning, the real tragedy of this entire story is that Nolan Klein died in prison, having served 21 years of a 30-year sentence for a crime he did not commit and has never been able to stand up in a court of appeal and contest. So
I'd like to correct that.
Okay.
He spent 21 years, 5 days in a prison for a crime he didn't commit. The actual sentence was he was given a 5 to life, count 2, 5 to life, count 1 and 2, and another 5 to life, or 7.5 to 7.5, and then there were 2 other counts, 5 to life, 5 to life. So basically, if you added them all up together, it would be about 40 years plus 2 lives.
4 years plus 2 lives. So
no, 40.
40 years plus 2 lives.
Yeah,
so
you added them all up.
So the bottom line is, this is not just about an individual who is serving a sentence for a crime he didn't commit. This is an individual who will never see the light of day, although he never committed a crime.
Yeah, that is correct. And then as I go through everything, after the trial, we'll just say that after the trial was over, then I began my investigation. I started to look at stuff that was given to Shelley, particularly that newspaper clipping where it talked about April 21st. I was able to go down to the library and look back for archives.
So let's just pause there, Tonja. Let's take a deep breath. Let's give our audience an opportunity to actually capture some of this information that we've just shared with them. Some of them only hearing it for the first time. So in rounding that up and getting to where we are now, which is a place of conviction where he's been found guilty for a crime he didn't commit. We've just talked about all the inaccuracies, all the indifferences that took place. Everything that went against him getting a fair trial and the jury coming around to the correct verdict. We've rounded all that up in a way that they can understand it and see the injustice of it all. And at that point in time, he now gets convicted, sentenced to 40 years plus 2 lives, however you the terminology you use. But now, before the fight even begins, there has to be an impact to the outcome of this sentencing and conviction and verdict to you and your family. What was the impact to your family once Nolan was found guilty? By the way, at that point, you were convinced he was innocent already, right? You didn't need any convincing then, did you?
Oh, no, I knew he was innocent.
Right.
I had several witnesses. My mom had witnesses, but they did testify. Nolan had witnesses. Shelley wouldn't call. So those people she didn't call. So we all knew Nolan was innocent of this crime.
So here you are. Here you are. This is not just somebody who's convicted for a crime they didn't commit. This is your brother. This is somebody that you love. This is somebody that you spent almost your whole life with. And now they're about to take that away from you. What was the impact of this verdict to the family as a whole?
It was devastating. It was actually so bad that when I had to call my grandma to let her know that Nolan was convicted and what he got and sentenced, she began to cry. And she asked me to get off the phone. She had to go. I would learn later on, my grandma was having a heart attack. It nearly killed her. She was rushed to the hospital. And I could never from then on discuss Nolan's case with her because of her health. So, I mean, there's things like that. My mother became a very hardened woman over the years because of this situation. It haunts me because if it hadn't have been for me asking Nolan to stick around to repair my daughter's roof, he wouldn't have been here. He would have been up in Washington. So I have the guilt from that. So I made a promise to him, and I will continue to keep that promise. And I am working on that through legislation.
Right. Okay. So here's the thing. Treva also says that the public defender should have appealed the sentence but did not. So I would have imagined there should have been an application to appeal the moment the verdict was delivered. So why wasn't an application? Yeah. So why wasn't a direct appeal made immediately once the verdict was knowing what we know, and why wasn't a direct appeal made immediately?
Okay, so when you're convicted, you're automatically given a direct appeal, and it's usually the public defender that does it. And her name was Karen Griffel. Okay, Karen Griffel was her name. Nolan had some conversations with her about this, told her exactly because the direct appeal deals with what happens in the courtroom. Okay, so things pertaining to what happens in the courtroom. So he outlined everything that went wrong in the courtroom that was to go on to his direct appeal. She never did it. She never did. In fact, that was in part of one of the grounds on the post-conviction on ineffective assistant. Not only was against Shelley O'Neill, but Karen Griffel. Okay, so here's the interesting thing. When he goes into court at the Supreme Court, I was there. I was present. I actually have the tape recording of that, the oral arguments. And it's called an oral argument. And I'm sitting in the back of she's representing Nolan. She couldn't remember a lot of things. And what was more, I think, wrong in this whole situation was that when the Supreme Court Justice asked Miss Griffel if her client had testified, she said, "Oh, yes, he did." And I'm in the back shaking my head, no. And they're saying, "Well, we're being led to believe he didn't testify." And she goes, "Yeah." And then she laughs. She says, "Oh, that's right. Nope, he didn't testify." They should have stopped that right then and there and said, "You know what? You are ineffective if you don't even know if your client had even testified on his own behalf." But they didn't. They issued a ruling on it, and they denied it. But they didn't deal with a lot of things. And I think Treva can touch on that.
Okay, I want to just stop you there just for a moment. I want to bring in Stephanie Babb, our member of the Round Table team. She's been listening very carefully in the background to all of this information that you've been sharing with us thus far, and I'm quite sure that she's probably got some things that she wants to contribute and some thoughts that she might want to add to this. Coming in, Stephanie. How are you doing, Steph?
Hi, Tonja. How are you doing? So I have a question. You talked about your family, and yet Nolan is in prison. He's in jail. He's sitting here. Who's his support? What was going on for him when all this was going on? I know he was talking to you a lot and giving the information, but emotionally, who was there for him?
Nobody.
Yeah.
Other than his family, there wasn't. But over the years, when Troy Anderson with the Nevada appeal, he would later to go on to Better, Bigger, and Better and be nominated for a Pulitzer Prize. He did an investigative story on Nolan back in July of 1993 after I protested it at the Public Service Commission, where Shelley came out to speak to me and where she admitted that she had lied and committed the perjury. Because I had filed a complaint with Reno PD and Washoe County. So it was after that story that people started to come on board and say, you know what, I think this guy's innocent. So then Nolan started to have a follower over the years. And so I'd run into the store and I would hear people say something like, did you read that story on that guy in prison and his sister?
Wow.
And then I'd go to the legislature, and even some of the people there and our legislators would say, oh, I know who you are. You're the girl, you're the girl's got the brother in prison. And I'd say, yeah. So then so that's kind of how the support came along. They started to listen to it. And because of that, over the years, I've told Nolan's story through legislature, and laws have changed because of it, for the better, for the innocent.
Amen. Amen.
That's right. That's right. So these people who have admittedly perjured themselves, lied, and these are the people that we rely on to defend us, to stand up for us. Have any of them, like, beyond just the nonchalantly, oh yeah, I might have done that kind of thing, have any of them stepped up after all this and knowing all the information and reviewing all the evidence? Has there been even one person that has stepped up and said, you know what, there was a great injustice and I'm sorry, let's do something about this, or have even admitted it?
I will say that no to that, except if you want to include Shelley O'Neill's own investigator. He did in 1993, in September of 1993, gave a sworn affidavit that there was no investigation. He was not aware of any investigation into Ricky Lizarski that Shelley had testified back in 91 about. That she had her investigator check him out and determined that he couldn't have committed the crime, Mr. Zarski, because he was in custody in another state. None of that is true. He disappeared the day after the crime occurred. But there is a sworn affidavit, and guess what? That went on to appeal to the Supreme Court on Nolan's post-conviction, and I believe it was Justice Springer who denied that affidavit. So that's never been dealt with either. Now, if you we'll get into the Conviction Integrity Committee, which was Jennifer Noble, which is Chris Hicks, Washoe County District Attorney's Office, Chris Hicks. He implemented a Conviction Integrity Committee, and I became aware of that in, I believe it was in October of 2018, in which I was attending one of the legislative interim committees.
Can I just step in and say the irony of having an integrity committee appointed in a court of law? So there's already an admission of a gross injustice right there. That just kills me. So
here's the thing, just very quickly, because Treva is still, throwing in stuff as we speak. So she also says, I mean, we haven't talked about him much yet, but the main suspect who you uncovered was Ricky Lizarski, who knew about the crime and said that there was no rape.
Correct.
Okay. Let's
yes.
Go into that for a bit.
Go into that?
Yeah, let's go there, shall we?
Okay, let's go there. Okay, so Treva has been Nolan's attorney for many, many years. She didn't represent him on the criminal part of it, not all of it, but she was there. She had represented him on other things too, and in some of his criminal as well, when she did a petition for exoneration after his death. She represented him at the Pardons Board. But during the wrongful death suit, we decided that we were going to find Ricky Lizarski, because now, with the technology, could we find him?
So hold fire. We're gonna have to stop you and get you to pause for breath every now and again so we can get in there. Otherwise, we're just gonna have this thing and we're gonna get no questions out. Because part of what we wanted to do with this particular show was talk about how far you went and what you did in order to uncover the truth behind this miscarriage of justice that had your brother convicted for a crime he didn't commit. So I just want you to, you've gone straight in there. I really want you to lay this down a little bit. So how did you get to hear about Ricky Lizarski before you went looking for him?
That newspaper article that was admitted at trial, that was given to Shelley, but it was not to go to the jury. It had the composite sketch, and that's where it said there was an unidentified detective who said this was very similar to an attempted sexual assault, armed robbery on April 21st. That was put into a post-conviction proceeding, and I told Nolan's attorney at the time, Joe Plater. I found an attorney to take on the post-conviction. Joe Plater was his name. I ran everything down to him. And so he subpoenaed the records from the Sparks PD. And when they were subpoenaed and brought into court, Shelley was about to testify. I think she might have been even on the stand. We were out in the hallway. He comes out and he says, "Hey, Tonja," he says, "you remember you saying that there had to be another man, another suspect?" I said, "Yeah." He says, there is. He says, "His name's Zarsky." I said, "Do you think Shelley knew about it?" He said, "No, but I'm going to go find out." And he goes back in there. So that's how we knew about Zarsky going back to 1991. Then during the testimony of Shelley, she testified that she had her investigator check him out, which I just told you about Tim Ford's affidavit, which there was no investigation into Zarsky. And so that's part of how Zarsky got into it. A lot of this information came out of the post-conviction proceedings from the records being subpoenaed by the Sparks PD, not the district attorney. Okay, so when I got all of this, I would start looking into everything. And then after the post-conviction, when I got the trial transcripts, it started her perjury. Like Dr. Posa, I contacted him. He absolutely denied he ever spoke to the woman after he sent the report and was very angry. I had Nolan back in 1990, 1991 actually, contact the Washoe County Sheriff's Office because I just figured Shelley was going to lie about how many times she saw Nolan. I just knew that she was going to do it, and she did. So I asked him to get the sign-in sheets for all the times the attorneys came. Well, Nolan testified that Shelley came to see him twice at the jail and never after the jail, because Shelley said that Nolan had confessed after the jail. After he was convicted. Well, she couldn't have. And then he narrowed it down in his lawsuit. He said she said that it was after the trial down at the jail when he sued her for slander. Okay, so then that was some of the initial evidence that I had discovered. Okay, and so over the years I would compile it together, and then it would go into the post-conviction, but it would never be addressed. And then when it goes back to Zarsky, when Nolan died, we were in the wrongful death suit. Treva and I discussed it, and I said, "So we're gonna hire a private investigator." And at that time, I'd found Zarsky online through technology, and I knew that he was living in Orem, Utah. And I found him through his mugshot because he had been arrested for I think drunk and disorderly. Okay, so anyway, I contacted a private investigator in Utah. He was able to locate Mr. Zarsky, carry on a conversation with him, and record his conversation with him with everything. And so then I got an email from the investigator saying that Mr. Zarsky wanted to meet with me. So I drove to Utah to hear what he had to say. And so that's how I've learned all of this. And then as that is pending, we still have this information, but it really doesn't do us any good right now. So it's a matter of waiting. And then this was in 2009, or that was in 11. In 2009, before Nolan's death, Treva had filed a motion to compel Dick Gamick to turn over the DNA test results because he had revealed that they had opened up the DNA and tested it. And that was an issue going back to 1998 during a hearing we had on the missing evidence. So Treva filed that. And then, to our surprise, Judge Brent Adams granted the order, but he also included to turn over the entire file in Nolan Klein's case. So the file was turned over, I believe, by Gary Hattelstedt, who works with the DA's office. That was turned over to Treva, a copy of everything in the file. And it was in the file we discovered all the evidence that was hidden from the defense and showing how Ron Rachow had left on our motion for discovery in 1988, his handwritten notes showing that he did not turn over the evidence. So that means that Shelley O'Neill never could have known about Zarsky or all the other stuff she had testified to that she had seen because he never turned it over. Okay? So as Treva was getting ready to file her motions for new trial and bail, Nolan had died. After that, I had taken that information, I put it into a writ of mandamus. I'm not an attorney, and I filed it in the matter of the estate of Nolan Edward Klein in Washoe County. It was assigned to Judge Patrick Flanagan, and in his order denying the petition, he said that those handwritten notes of the prosecutor that showed he didn't turn over the evidence was not a Brady violation, but a work product. I appealed it to the Nevada Supreme Court, and at the time, ADA Paul Liparelli was assigned to the case. He continually argued that I was practicing law without a license, and the Supreme Court agreed with him. So my appeal was denied, was dismissed.
How did you and Treva meet? How did she get involved in the case in the first place?
I went to her back in the 90s after I learned about the missing evidence, the missing DNA evidence, which was the cigarette filters and the tampering of the evidence. It was after our hearing, so that was over and done with. It was still pending in court, and I went to her about it, and we got to talking, and so she decided to be our attorney for whatever we needed, and she was placed on retainer.
Okay, so she's now talking about the DNA. She believes that the DNA was tested, but the results were never reported, and that is why the cigarettes were always different when you checked them.
Oh, right. Not just us. I remember once Treva calling. I called Treva because, as an attorney and also the author, she wanted to check the authenticity of the manuscript. So she went down.
So let's just pause for a minute. Let's understand what it is that we're talking about. So,
I believe the filters had changed their appearance while in the control and custody of the Washoe County Courthouse.
So 1 second. Where did they actually get the cigarette from that they were sampling for DNA?
From the crime scene. The perpetrator had smoked a couple of cigarettes, and he had left them on the floor at the Payless Shoe Store in the storeroom. They were seized.
So let's just play TV crime for a minute, right? Because when you watch TV crime, you watch Columbo. Because I grew up with Columbo. He's a great guy, Columbo, right? So Columbo would have identified that the cigarettes stub that they found was similar or identical to the brand that Nolan would have been smoking. But if it wasn't the brand that Nolan would have been smoking, that would have raised a red flag. So did the cigarette that they found, right, did it match the same type or style of cigarette that Nolan smoked?
That's exactly what I was looking for, because after the trial, things didn't make sense. So I actually went down to view the evidence, not knowing if I could. And I was able to have access to the evidence. Dick Dewar, who was the supervisor of the evidence room, stood by. I observed things. I touched some things, and he put it back in there. And he made photocopies. He never left the evidence unattended. Okay. So as I get to the cigarette butts, there were two of them. I pull them out, and I'm looking, and I take my fingers, I don't touch the ends, and I just roll between my fingers looking for a brand name. But he had smoked the cigarettes far enough to where there was no brand name, so I didn't know what the brand name was. Nolan smoked. I know what Nolan smoked. I know what my mom smoked. I smoked, and my other brother smoked. Okay, so this is in 1989. Okay, so then in 1995, after Judge McGee denied Nolan's petition, again, that the federal court sent back on the 23 grounds, he made the comment about we should have raised this Zarsky issue in the post-conviction petition. Well, I knew it had been because it came out at the hearing. So I wanted to view the evidence. So that's the reason I returned back to the evidence again in 1995. And it was here is that I discovered that the cigarettes are now missing their filters. They're gone.
So the filters were there, now they're not there.
1989 they were there, 1995 they are gone, and then it gets worse from there. So in 98, 99...
So 1 second, let's just be clear about this. Who has access to the evidence that we're talking about was missing?
Well, that's interesting because Treva discovered that. What happened was after I met Treva, she went down to view the evidence again. And as she's in the evidence room, the evidence guy went to go retrieve the evidence, and Treva picks up the index tracking cards. And on the index tracking cards, she views what it says, and it shows that there were attempts made after trial. Okay, by the district attorney's office, and there were notes on it saying the evidence is missing. Where's the evidence? Okay, and so when she saw it, there was two shreds of paper in there. Okay. So we asked to file a hearing to go back into court to find out what happened, and Judge McGee wouldn't allow it. And then he seals up the evidence, okay, without a court order type thing. And so Nolan files it to federal court. And so federal court's public defender sends their investigators out, and now they observe the cigarette butts, and guess what? Now they've grown in size.
Wow.
Okay? Yeah. And so that's where it's at. And then
let's just pause you there.
So the judge.
Yeah, let's just pause you there for a minute.
What happened?
No, let's
Judge denied everything.
Yeah, so let's just pause you there for a minute, please, Tonja.
Okay.
Stephanie.
Yeah, I'm right here.
Okay,
Hi.
So, what are you making of all of this so far, Steph?
Well,
now we're talking about the way that this evidence appears to have come, disintegrated, then reappeared as an even bigger thing than what it was in the first place. That's tampering of the highest degree, right?
correct. Yes. And I believe that they're just going back to cover the bases, per se. They've done that with my brother's case, and it makes sense to me. I know that sounds bad. Tonja, did you ever go back? Well, you said you went back and found the list of the people who had tried to view the evidence, which primarily is pretty much open to anybody who can get a key or who is a cop. Who has any kind of...
It was actually Treva who viewed the index tracking cards, and so she was able to do it, to see that it was. But we don't know who it was because Judge McGee nipped everything in the bud, we'll say.
So one second. Whoa, 1 second. So when she had a look at those cards, was there any names or that rang a bell? Anything that was out of sorts? Anything that didn't fit?
It's been so long. She gave a sworn affidavit, and I think I recall it saying that there were some initials on it, but it did clearly say that they were requested. They were by the district attorney's office after trial. And again, there was nothing pending in court at the time of this discovery, so there was no reason for anybody.
So the thing that I'm trying to outlay here is, if everybody who accessed those files were official, and the majority of people that was accessing it was the DAs, it's almost safe to assume that that's the only area it could have been contaminated or compromised.
Correct. Well, and again, like I said previously before, and the other things, before I discovered the filters were missing, in '89, the Nolan's DNA that contained his blood, saliva, pubic hair, and hair combings was sealed up with red tape. In 1995, now they were opened, and that's what caused me concern. And then I discovered the filters were missing too.
So has any DNA testing been done on any of the evidence that was held in order to convict him that can prove that it did not belong to Nolan Klein?
No, but in 2008, Dick Gamick publicly admitted during an interview when Nolan was about to appear before the Pardons Board that they opened up the DNA and they tested it. That's why Treva filed the motion to compel Gamick the DNA test results, and there wasn't any. But that's not to say that there wasn't anything in the name of Nolan Klein. But that doesn't mean that they didn't send it in a John Doe somewhere, and them knowing the truth.
So Treva also points out that the judge was one of those that also accessed those the evidence or those files, and his clerk's initials were also on it. So
that could be.
No, that's what she's saying. That's what she's saying. That's the message that she's just sending me, that she's putting it up on the chat now. The judge also accessed it. His clerk's initials were also there.
Okay.
Yeah, and this is a system who had to appoint an integrity committee to people who uphold our law. So to me, that says it all right there. If you have to find,
right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's the fox guarding the hen house.
Perfect.
Is what it
That's
is.
exactly right.
Yeah.
Have they found anything on the judge since then of misconduct or?
No. In fact, he is now a sitting judge for the state of Nevada. He gets to pick and choose what cases he wants to sit in on because he was retired instead of being recalled. But I will tell you, since we've kind of gotten into all of this, and then I'll let Treva take over, I just want to get to where we are currently with this information, where it stands. Okay, so I've done over the years, I've gotten laws changed and so on and so forth. And but in I believe October of 2018, Jennifer Noble, Assistant Deputy District Attorney Jennifer Noble with the Washoe County District Attorney's Office, during the Advisory Commission on the Administration of Justice, came up to the table and testified that they had recently implemented a public integrity, a conviction integrity committee, okay, to look into wrongful cases. So I kind of knew what was going to happen. I knew what they would do, and all they would do, like they always do, is just look at the previous court orders and determine what the courts say, and then go that way with it. Well, I decided to test the water, so to speak, so I submitted Nolan's case. Okay? And so I did. I got a letter from her, and then Treva wrote a letter on it too. We can talk about that. But I want to go right there, and I'm going to read this. It should only take me about a minute or two to read this. Okay. And this is from the Washoe County Conviction Integrity Committee that Washoe County District Attorney Chris Hicks implemented. It says, "Dear Miss Brown, this letter is in response to your oral and written request that the Washoe County District Attorney's Conviction Integrity Committee, CIC, review the felony convictions of your brother Nolan Klein. As you are aware, on March 16th, 1989, a jury of your brother's peers found him guilty of 2 counts of robbery with a deadly weapon. You assert that Mr. Klein was wrongly convicted primarily because he had an alibi on the night of the offense. His trial counsel was ineffective, and the state negligently destroyed potentially exculpatory DNA evidence. The CIC has learned that each of these concerns have already been thoroughly considered and rejected by the jury or by judges from the independent judicial branch of government. As such, the CIC is unable to offer a more thorough review than these citizens or elected and sworn Nevada judges. Their examination of your brother's conviction is summarized below." On December 28, 1989, the Nevada Supreme Court affirmed Mr. Klein's conviction for the first time. See Klein versus State. The court noted that the jury heard testimony from a number of witnesses, including yourself, to support Mr. Klein's alleged alibi that he was at Jack's Bar the night of the crimes. The jury of 12 citizens were in the best position to evaluate the evidence related to Mr. Klein's alleged alibi. As the Nevada Supreme Court recognized, the jury of your brother's peers apparently found the prosecution's witnesses more credible than the witnesses for the defense because it returned guilty verdicts on all counts. In other words, the jury found that the state proved beyond a reasonable doubt that Mr. Klein was not at Jack's Bar as you and Mr. Klein's other alibi witnesses claimed at trial. The CIC cannot offer a more thorough assessment of your claim than the 12 citizens that served on Mr. Klein's jury. Prior to his death in 2009, Mr. Klein was represented by several different defense attorneys who filed numerous post-conviction petitions and other post-trial motions on his behalf. That was Treva and me, arguing that his trial counsel was ineffective and that he was actually innocent. Different judges from the Second Judicial District Court have considered and repeatedly rejected his petition and motions as well as claims made posthumously on his behalf. The Nevada Supreme Court has similarly considered and rejected his appeals over the last 30 years, including in 1993, 94, 98, 2002, 2009, and 2011. See Klein versus States in the docket numbers. The courts have been presented with the same arguments you raised out, and have determined they do not properly.
Just stand by a minute. Tonja, stand by a minute. We're losing you. You're going robotic. Are you there?
And I'm done. It's done.
Yeah, but we're losing you almost.
So Treva can answer this.
Okay, so we're losing you. You are going robotic.
Do you want to try to call me back?
Yeah, so I'm going to call you out and call you back in. Okay. Let me just get Stephanie while I'm doing that. Stephanie,
you're going to call me back?
Yep, I'm going to call you back. Let me just get Stephanie.
Yeah, I'm right here.
Right. Come on in, Stephanie.
I am here.
What are you hearing so far?
Well, I'm hearing the very same thing, that they just keep shutting him down and shutting him down and shutting him down every chance they get. There's, for them to write a letter, this is really simple to me. When you're looking for facts, you go to the evidence, you go to what is. And so if somebody's they talk about him being in a bar. And so you have the 12 jurors saying that, well, we believe this one person over the other person. But that's what's called, they do that with cops too. It's called qualified immunity. The courts are already prejudiced toward a police officer because they've taken a sworn statement saying they're going to uphold the law. So when they walk in to have a testimony, they're already given the prejudice of the courts that they and what they have to say.
Okay,
is more true
just one
than
second.
anything else.
Let me just run that by you, right? Because here's an analogy of what you've just explained. An officer can get qualified immunity because he has pledged an oath stating that he is committed to upholding the law and etc. of the state of which he's governed and all the rest that goes with it, right? In layman's terms, right? Is it any different
That's right.
to an individual who comes in from a foreign country who has to pledge his allegiance to the United States of America and its flag and then is called a terrorist? Is there any difference? Because shouldn't that guy say, well, hang on a minute, I should be immune because I've pledged my allegiance? Is it not the same?
Well, what's more true or true? If you're a juror, you swear to uphold the law in the best way that you know how. You also swear. So who's being more true? So one person swearing that they're going to tell the truth is even more than another's? I don't see how that's even... Because in a court of law, that's where it should be pulled apart.
Because that's where we're going now. We're going to say that one person's truth is more impressive than another's, even though they're all having to go through a very similar procedure in order to clear to announce or express their commitment or allegiance. And
that's right.
And qualified immunity, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, if you are listening, does not apply to anybody that's not a law enforcement officer. So the real understanding of qualified immunity, translated into layman's terms, is that a law enforcement officer cannot be prosecuted for a crime that you're claiming that he committed if he cannot confirm that he is aware of which one of your basic human rights he has breached. That's the real understanding of qualified immunity. And when we look at that in a nutshell, and we think of some of the cases that we've talked about over this show, where someone has been shot 76 times or 21 times, or Andre Gladden, who was registered blind, and when you think, then you say to yourself, well, how didn't he know? How didn't the officer know he was in breach of someone's rights when he perpetrated that action? How didn't he know? Because if he's unaware that this is wrong, then he has no right to the qualified immunity that protects him against prosecution, because that, I'm sorry, it's just stupidity. You must know that shooting somebody 76 times in the back is wrong. You must know that falsifying evidence is wrong. You must know that planting a gun on an innocent person that had his back to you, running away, and then making a statement saying that individual was coming at you and you feared for your life is wrong. You must know it's wrong. So how does qualified immunity guarantee every law enforcement officer against prosecution when the weight of evidence that we have come across so often testifies against that?
Well, here's the thing, is qualified immunity was presented because cops needed that extra power in order to uphold the law, to make our communities safe. They needed that. So when they came up against that, but now in this day and age, with the kind of evidence that we're able to obtain and to prove, it blows that out of the water. Then you come back down to the truth.
So let me just throw out another boomerang, shall I? So back in the day, because that's what we're talking about, this qualified immunity was raised back in the day because they needed protection for whatever reason. So let's go to back in the day. Back in the day, it was seen right that a parent could chastise their child by disciplining them, by beating them, smacking them, and doing all kinds of things in order to keep the child in line. Then later on, it was deemed unacceptable because that form of discipline was being used in the wrong way by too many people who actually got a kick out of beating up on children, like, you know, teachers and all these kind of areas where this kind of behavior became absolutely unacceptable, and the law was changed in order to protect the child, right? So we're talking about a very similar scenario.
That's exactly right.
Where an issue was brought in, right, to protect a particular thing that made sense. We understand that law enforcement officers coming out to serve and protect needed some kind of protection in case they made a mistake. But now that you know it's being misused, misrepresented, right, you need to put something else in place, because at the minute, right, it's the innocent victims that are suffering because of this unruly law that has been used over and over again to re-victimize victims who have been made victims by the police in the first place.
That's exactly right. And we do have something. We do. We have evidence. And that's why they continue to suppress it at every turn, as long as it's not presented.
So we're still trying to get Tonja Brown back in, but for whatever reason, as we know, the system, she was really just building up towards the end of this thing that she was reading, and it really just looked like we had this in the last show as well. I think we lost her for about half an hour, and we couldn't get her back in, but we will continue to keep trying to get Tonja Brown back in. Maybe Anne-Marie Grant can step in very quickly if she is there. She's been supporting Tonja Brown throughout all of this. But I don't think she's listening because she's not unmuting her mic at the moment. So Stephanie, I'm going to bring you straight back in again.
Right on.
And
I'm right here.
Let's just keep it rolling, because I just felt a whole heap of whoop-ass come out of me then, you know. When you know, sometimes God works in mysterious ways. When
I was loving it, boss.
Was you loving that, TJ?
Oh my gosh, yes. It's, you know, yes. Woo!
I just felt the power coming out of me.
Because now, but now that we have the evidence, now that we have the ability to prove these things, you get to see this power, unadulterated power, being abused by these people that we've put in position to abuse. We're to assume that everybody has our rights, that they want to do the right thing. That's the integrity, like the integrity committee of the Constitution. But when those very things are abused in order to keep the powers that are still in place and staying there, in spite of the evidence, the overwhelming evidence proving otherwise, that's the system that we're fighting. That's the injustice, the criminality that they're now perpetrating on us. It's gone full circle.
Well, I'm just trying to get. Yeah. So we've lost Anne-Marie Grant and we've lost Tonja Brown. I'm going to try and bring them both back in again. Keep talking, guys, while I try and get them all back in again.
Okay.
We're hoping.
So yes.
Go on, keep talking.
Yeah. You know, it's the same thing. Well, and it's the same thing with my brother's case. You know, the thing that I kept pushing is a jury of our peers. But you can manipulate anything by the information given. To me, I'm like, put it all out there. Let's see what we got. Let's go through it. Let's sift through it and prove what is true and what's not true. I'm not going to take what somebody says over something else without evidence, without proof that it's true. And so now you have cases like Nolan, you have somebody like Tonja who has dedicated her entire life toward proving the reality that this exists, that this system continues to corrode our way of doing things. It taints everything that we do. How do we feel free? How are we supposed to feel okay about our police, about our justice system, when this continues to happen in such a gross
America, land of
negligence?
the right, Steph? We're not free.
That's right.
And I don't know
I mean, I love America. I'm very patriotic. Yet, when you step into a courtroom and there are some good people, there are good judges and there are good cops, but the people who allow this to happen, that are in a position of power and see it happening and turn away from it, they're just as culpable as the person lying in the first place. And we've got to break that up. That's right.
Absolutely. And as Patrick Lane says, the system is broken.
And they should be held just as well and just as hard as any criminal, right? Because they are criminals, right?
Right, but our whole system would fail. It would fall. And that's what's starting to happen now.
Right. It's a revolution.
But as Patrick Lane says, the system is broken. We have a legal system driven by profit. It's not a justice system. It's being driven by profit. What would you say to that, Steph?
Well, that's absolutely correct. I mean, they're starting to address privatized prisons, but essentially when you have our whole political system based on an economy that comes from millions, billions of dollars, that's based on putting people in prison and targeting people of color and targeting that because they don't have so it goes back because they can target people of color in certain communities, which they've actually set up communities like this. I mean, this is really, it's got levels, but they can't defend themselves and they don't have the money. They don't have the economic, the socioeconomic, they target those people. And they continue this because if you look at it realistically, they're supposed to arrest so many people. They have a quote unquote job to do. So they have a quota to fill because that quota keeps the coffers filled. It keeps the money moving our economy along, and it goes higher and higher and higher, and that's more money until you get into these like corporations and everything else, and it puts the position, it just trickles down to the person who's victimized by this in the first place. But people get so used to just moving with this whole cog, that just this machinations of what our country has come to accept as normal in our prison systems, in our legal systems. It's not about keeping our communities safe anymore. We know that. The people on this show know firsthand this isn't about safety. This is about power, and this is about money. And we're not going to get anywhere until we keep talking about this and we keep bringing it to the forefront and we keep pushing evidence and the reality of the truth down their throats.
We've got Tonja Brown back in now. Hi, Tonja.
Hi. Was Treva able to fill you in on that Conviction Integrity Committee?
No, because Treva's had to go. She's got an issue that she's dealing with the Indian tribe, and she couldn't stay.
Okay, can I? I'll break. I will. If you don't mind, I will briefly tell you the email that I got after I was informed of the Conviction Integrity Committee's decision. Okay. Yeah. And it says, so this was right afterwards. I contacted Treva, and it's regarding her letter, Miss Jennifer Noble's letter from the Washoe County DA's office. She says, my first question is, if she isn't going to look behind jury decisions and appeals, what is the purpose of her committee? Are they only looking at confessions that didn't appeal? It certainly would make for a light workload. Did she read the book. She failed to mention that there was exculpatory evidence never turned over. Example, the report from Fallon police officer turned over to Box. Also, the report of the other officer who went to the hotel to investigate further on Zarsky. The pattern of crimes with the same MO wasn't turned over either. And that the two victims of the pattern of crime didn't identify Nolan. She didn't mention the flawed lineup and the undue influence on the victims by the police. There are so many missing issues from her letter. It is glaring, but if she is confining herself to non-jury pleas without an appeal, then this isn't it. That was her response to that letter.
Wow.
Okay, so, and if you take a look at it, where she talks about the jury, if she would have done her job like she should have, where they need to go back into the original post-convictions, she would have seen that why the jury convicted Nolan was never addressed by any court. You see what I mean? And not only this, and this is very important, I want to get out before we get cut off. When I had over an hour conversation with Jennifer Noble, and during our conversation, I ran her down everything. Remember that missing DNA that I told you about?
Yeah.
And this is what I told Jennifer Noble too. And I sent her the emails, which I have, which I will present to the advisory commission when they come back. And in it, during that conversation, remember I told you about Joe Plater? He was the post-conviction attorney. Then he became the DNA attorney on that too. We asked him to come back to do the DNA hearing. He was all on board, not a problem. I turned over, and I still have the communications with him and letters to Joe Plater to confirm what I'm about to tell you. So anyway, back in 1995, we discovered the filters missing. Nolan files a petition to find out what's happening. Joe Plater comes on and he takes it. I give him the information. He asked me who was going to, Eric gave me the list of the names of the witnesses, what they're going to testify to. I gave him the name of Judge Mills Lane and Reno Detective Niles Carson. I have a letter from them, which he got, which shows how they were going to conspire to conceal the disappearance of the missing evidence. Okay? And this is what I'm telling Jennifer Noble, too. He was given other information dealing with the missing DNA. And so, anyway, I also told him that I had pictures because in 1989, I took photographs of the evidence with the red tape still intact, never opened, and pictures in 1995. Now they've been opened. So here's the evidence showing the tampering of the evidence. I'd given this to Joe Plater. Nolan outlined everything he wanted him to do and the issues that need to go, and that dealing with bad faith. And everything was fine. And it had gone on for nearly a year, I guess. Okay. And so the hearing got postponed until April of 1998. And prior to that, Nolan had called me and asked me if Joe had put in for a prison request because they won't ship him to court. So I said, I'll check and everything. And I called Judge McGee's office, and there wasn't anything put in, and there was no continuance or anything else. So I got a hold of Joe Plater, and I asked him about it. And he said his whole attitude had changed. All of a sudden, he totally changed, and I had no idea why. And so I asked him if he had contacted, if he had talked to the witnesses, if he's going to bring in my witnesses, which I just, there was Carson, there was Detective Jenkins, there was, most importantly, there was Dick Dewar, the supervisor of the evidence room. He tells me, no, I'm not going to call them in as witnesses. I said, oh, yes, you will. We need those people there. And he says, no, I'm not doing it. And I says, yes, you will. And he says, and he told me to leave it alone. He says, Tonja, just leave it alone, in an angry voice, and hung up on me. Nolan calls me back, and I said, hey, Nolan. I said, I talked to Joe, and I said, something's different. Something's not right here. And I said, honestly, Joe? I said, honestly, Nolan, I think Joe's going to screw you over. I said the F word, okay? But I won't say it here. I said, he's going to screw you over. And Nolan said, no, he's not. You're crazy. I said, I don't know how or why, but Joe's going to screw you. And so anyway, Nolan gets brought into court on the DNA. Nolan has now been given some pain medication like Vicodin and stuff on an empty stomach. He's high going into court. Okay, Nolan told Joe to meet him. Joe never even spent 1 minute with Nolan prior to that hearing. Where was Joe? Joe was outside the courtroom speaking to Gary Hattlestead when I show up. Gary Hattlestead is now representing the district attorney on the missing DNA. And I walk up to Joe, and I walk up to Gary Hattlestead, and Gary Hattlestead looks at me and he says, "So, did you bring the filters with you?" And I said, "I don't have the filters, and you must be Gary Hattlestead." And he had this look on his face. Joe kind of gave a giggle, and Gary says, "Yeah." He says, "I am." He says, "It's just a joke we have going around here in the office." I says, "Well, I don't think it's funny, and I'm going to make it known in court." And so anyway, at that time, I gave Joe the pictures that I took in '89 after the trial and '95 with the evidence, handed them to him. We go into the courtroom. Nolan is testifying. He's high. I'm sitting there, and I see Joe Plater hand Gary Hattlestead the pictures, okay? And that's the last time I see him. I get up, I testify. Hattlestead doesn't ask me any questions whatsoever, okay? So, judge renders his decision and denies anything, denies Nolan's petition, okay? And so afterwards, we get the order, and Nolan calls me up, and he asks me, he says, he was so disappointed in Joe, and he says, I would have never believed he would screw me over like that. Of all people, Joe. I says, I told you he was going to, and I don't know why he did. And he says, but I want you to do me a favor. He says, I want you to get a hold of Joe, and I want you to call him and find out if he will file a motion for reconsideration. Not a motion, but my motion for reconsideration. So I did. I called Joe Plater, and I said, Joe, I said, Nolan's doing a motion for reconsideration, and he wants you to submit it. And Joe says, no, I'm not going to do that. I said, what? He said, no, I'm not going to do that. I said, why aren't you going to do that? There was stuff that you should have put in and didn't raise that he told you about, and we discussed. And you need to do this. He says, no. He says, but, if he wants to send it to me, I'll look it over. And I said, okay. Nolan called me back to find out what Joe had said, and I told him, and he says, oh, no, screw him. I'm going to do it myself. So he says, I'm writing Joe a letter, in which I got a copy of, and Joe got it, and I confirmed it with Joe. He did get it. He asked him to withdraw his counsel. Joe put in and withdrew his counsel, okay? And then Nolan filed the motion for reconsideration on the facts and stuff like this, because all this thing about bad faith, Joe had it. He was supposed to put it in, raise it. He didn't do it. And so what happened was, again, the judge denied it. But here's what's interesting. I could never figure out why Joe would do that to us until we were looking for the authenticity of the book and going back, and Treva needed to contact everybody, okay? So we had to find out where Joe was working, to make sure he's still in private practice. Oh, no. He was working for the Washoe County District Attorney's Office in the Appellate Division with Jennifer Noble.
Wow.
Okay, where she's at. 20 years ago, he went to work for Gary Hattlestead in the Washoe County District Attorney's Office almost 8 weeks before Judge Order gave that final decision. That he should have never done. He had a moral and ethical obligation to inform his client he was going to work for the opposition.
Wow.
And then the other problem was those pictures that I gave him, they disappeared. I asked Nolan, I said, did you got the letter? Did you got the pictures? They're the only things I've got. He says, no, I don't have them. Joe has them. So when I called Joe he says, no, he don't have them. He says he left them there. I finally called the courthouse. The courthouse said, yeah. He said, we did pick up, there was a picture, not two, but there was a picture.
I mean, that's a real conflict. That's a real conflict.
Fortunately, I found the negatives. I got the negatives. But I have everything in writing to Joe and what Joe didn't do it. So in 2002, when Jennifer Noble talks about the decision in her in 2002, that was the missing DNA evidence. And
just one other thing. Just one other thing. You've got the show on, or you've got the live stream on in the background, because I can hear it echo. You're going to need to stop that or turn that off.
Okay. I don't think I do, but
okay.
Oh, you know what? Hold on. Can you still hear it?
I can't. No, it's gone now.
You can't? Okay. So anyways, so in 2002, the Supreme Court dismisses the DNA evidence, and this is what gets me, and this is why I'm going to take to the ACJ, because I'm going to rip Jennifer Noble's letter and show how that is the Conviction Integrity Committee is nothing but a dog and pony show. Wow. Because in that she refers to, okay, first of all, they make a reference to the confession, okay, that Nolan confessed to his attorney. Well, you know what? none of that is true. They didn't even look into any of that. Okay. And secondly, and this is important, isn't it funny that in the year 2000, our governor, Kenny Gwynn, office did a thorough investigation into it, including that so-called confession, and they determined that Shelley had lied and Nolan was innocent. They tried to get him the pardons board, but the pardons board will not accept, even to this day, anyone who's appealing their conviction. Okay, so that's one issue. And then the other thing too, where they talk about the jury, they've never once ever looked into that, because it's never been addressed by any of the courts on why the jury found him. So for her to say that the jury did this, no, the jury didn't know, and they misunderstood. And the interesting thing is that Anne Marie Grant was with me when we went down to the courthouse to look up these cases that Nolan had filed and that post-conviction petition case. Do you know what? So unless Jennifer Noble had that case in her office sitting around for 20 some odd years,
let's bring Anne Marie out.
She couldn't have had it because I had to file a thing to get it requested to put it on record.
Anne Marie's in the back. Anne Marie's available. I'm quite sure if she's ready. Do you want to come in a minute, Anne Marie? Just unmute your mic. She is on the call, but she's obviously not going to come in. There she is.
Hi there, sorry.
Okay, so you was with Tonja when she went in to go look at those. That's what she was just saying?
Yes, I was with her when she went there, yeah.
And what was it that you discovered or uncovered? What did you see?
Well, the DA could never have reviewed the whole file because there was a significant portion of the file not available. It was actually in their storage.
In another facility.
Right, off-site storage. So there's no way that the DA, Jennifer Noble, could have reviewed the entirety of Nolan's case if she did not even have access to it.
Yeah, I had to actually put in a request in July, and it wasn't until a few weeks later I got a call to go and look. And the interesting thing with that decision from 2002 with the missing DNA, the Judge McGee, along with the Nevada Supreme Court, said this, that Nolan Klein did not want to have any DNA testing conducted until after we discovered the filters on the cigarette butts were missing. That is not accurate whatsoever. In fact, Joe Plater was given a copy of the letter with the postmark of October 28th. And the letter written, the letter written October 26th and postmarked from the Ely State Prison, October 26th, 1995. In it, it talks about, he's writing a letter to me about, the Innocence Project, Barry Scheck, about getting some DNA testing done. So he calls me up after I get the letter that afternoon on the 28th, which was a Saturday. But Nolan always calls me 10 o'clock Saturday morning. So I talked to Nolan that morning, and he said that he was going to contact the Innocence Project because he actually sent a copy of the letter, a news article about the Innocence Project. On October 28th, which was a Saturday, 1995, I called the Innocence Project and I left a message about Nolan's case and if they would be interested about taking it on and what would be required to do so. On October 31st, which was a Tuesday, 1995, and happened to be Nevada Day, I was home. I got a call from Jonas Kant on October 31st, 1995. We discussed it. We told him there had been some tampering of the evidence. And I says, if you don't take on your case, take Nolan's case on what needed, he'd have to fill out the application. I asked him for a lab that they use. And he told me it was the Edward Blake Laboratories in California. And this is in October of 95. This is important. So after I had my conversation with him, a few days later, per Detective Jenkins' instructions, I was to go to view the evidence. So it wasn't until around November 2nd, I believe, of 1995, I made it down to the evidence room again to view it, and that's when I discovered the filters were missing. So in that 2002 order that Jennifer Noble refers to in the Supreme Court, I didn't find out the filters were missing until after I had already contacted the Innocence Project. So that is bullshit on their order. Not only that, okay, In 1996, Barry Scheck with the Innocence Project wrote a letter to the judge. I had to write another statement, which was filed. And that's in that case that Jennifer Noble didn't look into, but it's on record. In July of 1996, there's a statement by Tonja Brown detailing what that happened. And it clearly shows, and Barry Scheck didn't dispute it, okay, that we just contacted them prior to finding the filters missing. Now, we don't have a hearing. Nolan now files the petition on the missing evidence, the DNA evidence. We don't have a hearing until April of 1998. Judge McGee doesn't render his actual decision until August of 1998. Yet, he personally received my statement filed in court July of 1996 because I personally took it up to his office, gave it to Jackie Zucker. I then called back a couple of days later to see if he got the statement that I had given and gave a copy to Barry Scheck. And she said, yes, it is on record in the courts, 1996, 2 years before the hearing. So Judge McGee absolutely knew for a fact we contacted the Innocence Project before we discovered that. And not only that, I gave another statement in that motion for reconsideration again in 1998, and that was submitted to the Nevada Supreme Court. When I heard the case had been dismissed, I read it in the paper. And then Nolan had called me, but he hadn't sent me the order. I went down to the Supreme Court and looked through the file, and I pulled that statement out. And in it does say that I discovered the missing filters in November, and we had contacted the Innocence Project in October. So really, what comes first, October or November? So their whole saying is bullshit. And this is how I'm going to present it to the ACAJ when I try to go after. I do have a legislator, my representative, who is going to use his BDR to include factual innocence petition posthumously. The legislature did pass that this last session, which was this year. There were two bills. There were my bill that Senator Parks had, and he called it my bill, that had a petition for exoneration posthumously, the discovery issues. I think it was SB 384. And then there was McCurdy's bill, which was just a factual innocence. And when I learned that there were two bills, and then I told by Senator Parks and others that Jennifer Noble had gone to them to stop that bill from moving forward. And she went to work on the McCurdy bill, but they fought against posthumously. So I plan, that's my next step, to clear Nolan's name in 2 years, and I will go through the ACAJ to ask for their recommendation to support Representative Assemblyman, my representative. I'm not going to say his name, but he has agreed to do it.
Okay, just before we move on and we round up, yeah, I can still hear the echo in the background. So you've got something else going on, either on your phone or your computer, because I can hear my voice feeding back to you. All right.
Okay.
A quick question from Patrick Lane. He says this is a little bit off topic, but really, I don't think it is. I think it's a real pertinent question. What has allowed you to keep up this level of fight for innocence of your brother who passed away? He finds the story horrendous, but typical of our justice system or non-justice system. And what he finds most extraordinary is mustering up the strength year after year, decade after decade, to fight tooth and nail to clear Nolan's name. So what has allowed you to keep up this level of fight for his innocence?
Because I made a promise to him that I would exonerate his name. And if anybody is listening, and should I die before that happens, my family has assured me that they will step in to take care of it. Okay, but in the process of trying to clear his name, I became an advocate for the inmates. So over the years, particularly starting from 2007 on, I've worked to help the inmates and those who are innocent a chance to seek their freedom. For one instance, in 2007, and I think it was Senate Bill 501, the parole board could no longer ask if they were appealing their conviction, because before, if you were appealing your conviction, when they would ask, they would deny you. Yeah. So they can no longer ask you or consider that. There were other things that I have done over the years. In 2017 was the DNA evidence to allow DNA testing after conviction. In 2019, I helped work on the petition on factual innocence, and that passed, and the compensation law for compensation. So in 2021, I will go after factual innocence posthumously.
Okay, so we're just about to run out of time. There's a couple of things that we really need to get in, and I'd really love to get Stephanie Babb back in, so just for a quick roundup of the last part that she's heard. But first and foremost, and most importantly, the woman that should have been on the show with you, Treva Hearne, who is an author and was also Nolan's attorney for some time. She's also written the book To Prove His Innocence, and that book is available on Amazon. The book details all of this information and evidence that you guys have uncovered over the years, as well as all of evidence that was available throughout the entire investigation, trial, and conviction. So if you guys want to look up this book, it's called I can't remember what her.
It's called To Prove His Innocence
by
the Nolan Klein Tonja Brown to Mary Elizabeth Morgan. That's her pen name.
Yeah, Mary Elizabeth Morgan is the name that she's penned the book in. So
Correct.
Please, go out and buy a copy, support it. I believe that all the funds will be used towards continuing this fight for the exoneration of this. I can't even put words to it, because I couldn't imagine what I would be like if that was a family member or even somebody that I knew. I went into fight for 3 guys that were convicted of a murder that they didn't commit, the Cardiff 3, way back in 1988. None of them were family members, but I did get involved because I knew that they couldn't have been guilty. So I understand to a degree the level of persistence that you have here, which is what I and others needed, because in that Cardiff 3 case, I had the brothers of 2 of those that were convicted alongside me in the campaign. So I'm fully aware of the commitment of family members to exonerate their loved ones. But posthumously, where he's already died, and to continue to have, as Patrick Lane has just pointed out, that drive to fight, against all of these obstacles that you face day in and day out. It's really amazing. I just wanna bring in Stephanie just to round up for a minute or so before we come off. Come on, Steph.
Thank you, Kervin. I want to make a point in the last half an hour or so in listening to Tonja, and it's the same thing I tell families that are newly into this, is to prove the truth. You find evidence and you prove it's true 3 different ways, and then you put it away in 3 different separate places. That's your evidence, and you do it 3 times. You don't have a case. You can be as loud as you want until you have that evidence and you prove it. Tonja's done that. She's put in the time, the energy, everything else, and keeps finding the truth. When you think you've seen the truth, there's always something more to it, and you don't give up. And that's what Tonja's done.
And that's correct. That is correct. That is why I filed that writ of mandamus in 2010. I presented evidence that was found in the DA's file. So that way, should something happen to me down the road, all I have to do is whoever's going to do this should posthumously pass. They just got to go there and they can see it. It's there. And I have, like I said, and then I'm compiling all the stuff I gave to Joe Plater. And again, Jennifer Noble and I had a conversation. And I asked her, I said, so where does Joe Plater still work for you? Work in the DA's office? She says, yeah, he works with me. Wow. That's why they didn't want to do it. That's their whole reason. They won't admit to. But I'm going to bring it to the ACAJ and expose the Dog and Pony Show by Chris Hicks Conviction Integrity Committee and let them explain how they came up with that decision. Because I've got all the evidence in those cases, which I've got, and it's put in there. In fact, you can find a lot of the stuff on my Facebook. And if you actually go to Reno Cop Watch, because they've been really instrumental in getting this information out there. You can go to Facebook, Reno Cop Watch, and scroll down to around August. You can find a lot of things there and evidence. And I'm making it public, so it's out there. And I can't wait to see. I'm hoping that Chris Hicks will step up to the plate. But you know what? He's not. He's a coward.
We're about run out of time. I just want to thank Anne-Marie Grant, Treva Hearne, TJ, who's obviously had to fly out. But by the way, just remember that please pray for TJ and her family. Her grandson is currently in hospital at the minute, and she's quite worried about that, going backwards and forwards. And it was cut and dry whether she was going to make it for the show today or not. But we want to thank TJ for being here and making sure that this gelled together and worked. And I want to thank you, Stephanie and Tonja, for really making this a very factual show, really journalistically provocative, and getting people to really open up their minds and think about what this justice system is all about. We support you, Tonja, in your fight and your plight in trying to get justice for Nolan Klein. We believe he's innocent, and I think we've been able to prove it today. We're out of here. Thank you very much. This is the end of Issues Today. God bless. Take care, everybody, and we'll see you again next week.
Bye-bye.